Got a Mustang GT and want more top-end punch from your Gen 2 Coyote engine? Ford Performance Parts has you covered with their Power Pack 3 for 2015 to 2017 Mustang GTs. Installation is simple. We'll show you how. Ford Performance Parts ships the Power Pack 3 in 2 boxes. Let's take a look at what's inside. The first box includes the cold air intake. This is the same intake setup as on the GT350, and it's a proven power maker. There's a new brake booster hose and 2 more boxes. The smaller box contains the 87mm throttle body, another GT350 piece. The other box has some miscellaneous items that we're going to need for installation, including a new cold air intake duct, the Ford ProCal interface tool, a PCV hose, some all-important Ford Performance Parts stickers. Rumor has it they add 5 horsepower. Another PCV hose, purge valve wiring harness, and an air filter box seal. Now for the big power maker in this kit, the GT350 intake manifold. The packaging is really nice and made exclusively to keep this lightweight manifold safe while shipping. What's great about the Power Pack 3 is it uses all OEM quality parts that come right from Ford's production parts bins, meaning they fit just like the factory engineers designed. The GT350 intake manifold also utilizes intake manifold runner controls to maximize torque. The GT350 intake manifold is a direct bolt-on that matches the ports of the Mustang GT's cylinder heads. The 87mm GT350 throttle body vastly increases airflow potential over the 80mm stocker. This is where the magic happens. Ford's ProCal tool plugs into the Mustang's OBD2 port and loads the tune using laptop software from the Ford Performance Parts website. The cold air intake setup is another GT350 piece that includes a conical air filter, larger tubing, and even a new mass airflow sensor. A grommet replaces this silly sound tube. This seal and inlet duct finish off the installation. Before tearing apart the 2015 Mustang GT, we headed to Boost Addicts in Gallatin, Tennessee for a baseline power measurement. The auto-transmission-equipped Mustang GT made 324 horsepower and 314 pound-feet of torque on Boost Addicts' in-house Mustang dynamometer. With the baseline measurement out of the way, we got to work. First, we removed the fuse and relay for the fuel pump from the underhood fuse box. Then, we cranked the engine to depressurize the fuel system. We disconnected the battery. Then we removed the factory strut tower brace and engine cover. We turned our attention to the factory air intake setup by loosening the throttle body clamp and removing the airbox hold-down bolt. Mass airflow sensor connector, vent tubes, PCV tube, and mass airflow sensor harness anchor. Then we carefully removed the air intake as an assembly. We used 2 pliers to slide the brake booster hose clamp higher on the hose and disconnected the hose from the intake manifold. Next, we disconnected the vacuum hoses on the front. And at the brake booster so we could remove the brake booster hose assembly. Next, we removed the heater hose supports, fuel rail foam insulators, and disconnected the fuel injector connectors. With a rag ready to catch excess fuel, we disconnected the fuel supply tube. Next, we disconnected the purge valve electrical connector and purge hose from the purge valve. We removed the throttle body electrical connector, and the right side PCV hose connection. Before lifting off the manifold, we used compressed air to blow any debris that collected around the base of the intake manifold on the cylinder head flange so it didn't fall down the intake ports when we removed the manifold. After removing the intake manifold bolts, we lifted the manifold forward so we could reach the intake manifold runner control connectors at the back of the manifold. With everything disconnected, we removed the factory Mustang GT intake manifold. As a precaution, we covered the intake ports with tape. Besides the obviously larger throttle body, the GT350 intake manifold has taller runners and a higher plenum. Even though the intake manifold has a higher profile, the intake still fits under the factory Mustang GT strut tower brace. We continued the process by removing the fuel rails and ejectors from the Mustang GT manifold. Before inserting them into the GT350 manifold, we cleaned and lubricated the fuel injector O-rings with oil. The fuel injectors seat into the GT350 manifold with a satisfying click. Next, we turned our attention to the intake manifold runner control harness. Because the GT350 runner controls are in a different location, we needed to extend the harness. We did so by removing the harness tape and freeing more wire from the loom. Then, we retaped the harness with the wires extended. The kit also includes new harness supports on each side, as the holes for the supports are closer together on the GT350 intake manifold. With the harness modifications complete, we lowered the GT350 intake manifold into position. We connected the 4 runner control connectors at the back of the manifold. Then we torqued the intake manifold bolts in the sequence and specifications outlined in the instructions. Next, we connected the fuel supply hose and reconnected the fuel injectors. We replaced the fuel rail insulators and positioned the heater hoses on top. We transferred the purge valve and PCV fittings from the GT manifold to the GT350 manifold and used the supplied fasteners. The purge valve harness is too short for the GT350 intake manifold, so Ford Performance Parts includes an extension harness. We depinned the factory connector and inserted the contacts into the supplied connector housing. And don't forget to fetch the old connector housing if it falls. We replaced the PCV hose with the supplied one designed for the GT350 intake manifold. Next, we untaped the throttle body connector, fed it around the main harness, and connected it to the GT350 throttle body. After transferring the brake booster check valve from the factory hose to the supplied hose, we connected the new brake booster hose to the GT350 intake manifold. Ford uses pins to hold the clamps open to ease installation. When we are satisfied with the fitment, we remove the pins. The profile of the ram air duct is slightly different on the GT350 than on the GT, so we made 2 slits at the bottom of the duct so that it's sealed properly. We installed the GT350 cold air as an assembly. With a little patience, it fits perfectly. To secure the mass airflow harness to the cold air box, we drilled a 15/64 inch hole for the harness anchor and reconnected the mass airflow sensor connector. We replaced the left side PCV hose with the supplied one. Then we tightened the throttle body clamp and connected the runner control vent to the intake tube. We installed the supplied airbox seal. Next, we reinstalled the strut tower brace. Then we reinstalled the fuel pump relay and fuse. Finally, we reconnected the battery. That's it for the underhood work. Everything fits and looks factory installed on this 2015 Mustang GT, as it should. After using the supplied voucher and downloading the ProCal 3 software, we connected our laptop, loaded the tune, and fired it up. The next morning, we were back at Boost Addicts in Gallatin, Tennessee to see the results. The Ford Performance Parts Power Pack 3 is really impressive. While we lost a little peak torque, we gained 22 peak wheel horsepower. But peak numbers only tell half the story. With the stock setup, the horsepower party was over after 6,500 RPM. There really wasn't any point to spinning the Coyote faster. But after 5,700 RPM, the GT350 manifold keeps on trucking, all the way to 7,300 RPM. So while we lost a little torque down low, the top-end benefits are more than worth it. Boost Addicts dyno guru David Hines reasoned that the minor torque loss is irrelevant because at wide open throttle, the engine spends all of its time at the top of the RPM range anyway, where the gains are. The only time the engine is at wide open throttle down low is from a stop on first gear, and performance is probably traction limited there anyway. There's really no downside to the Power Pack 3 kit. The benefit of the Ford calibration cannot be overstated, especially with the larger 87mm throttle body. Aftermarket throttle bodies can wreak havoc with Ford's torque demand-based throttle control if not tuned correctly, but Ford's calibrators have done the work for you. This 2015 Mustang GT drives just like stock. Even the automatic transmission shift points are tweaked for the new RPM range and power level. The Power Pack 3 kit is the industry's only 50-state legal kit with an intake manifold upgrade to boot, so enthusiasts nationwide can enjoy the benefits of higher RPM performance from their 2015 to 2017 Mustang GT.